I believe that was August 3rd. And just state that when we recessed the meeting, one of the things that we talked about was trying to come back together today to review some additional information to put us in a position to potentially make some decisions towards applying for grants to the Dogwood Health Trust. But given the fact that we do have some items on the agenda that require some participation from folks here in the audience, and we want to be respectful of their time, I'm going to ask that we recess this reconvene meeting, this gets confusing, once again until 2 o'clock. And then that gives us a chance to take up the matters that they're here for without them having to sit here and wait on these other issues. And then we'll go through the regular work session agenda, and then at 2 o'clock we'll go back and hear these other items. Is that okay with you? Absolutely. Okay, so we have a motion then to recess this reconvene meeting until 2 o'clock. Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all ayes have it. Now, we'll go ahead and call to order the session of the Jackson County Board of Commissioners. I'll recognize our county manager to lead us through the discussion for today.
Yes, sir. We do have Mr. Jeff Darnell here. He is the Western Field Representative for the North Carolina Agricultural Development Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. Mr. Darnell, if you want to come on up. This is a request of Commissioner Dietz. I believe Mr. Darnell and Mr. Dietz were, Commissioner Dietz had some conversations. And
He's just walking in, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
well, I mean, we got 1 minute to one thought, so
Won't be way over.
Do you mind, because he's.
I love waiting on.
Yeah,
Everybody on my windscreen.
Yeah.
I don't think I can handle
That's right.
Do we give him just a minute?
I just happened to look and see.
okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, if we get, just so you know, Ms. Carraway, we've had to remove that item from today's discussion.
Okay.
So we would go down to Mr. Lewis. And so the option is wait.
Well, it should take him about 5 to 10 minutes to get up here at the most. So we're going to be removing item 2.
Yes, sir.
Stop.
And items 4 and 5 will be follow-up discussions we potentially take up after we reconvene. Did any, while we're waiting, so let's just go ahead and ask, under other business, that we usually take up on item 6B. Mr. Woody, did you have anything else today?
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Jones, did you have any other business today that you wanted to bring up? Mr. Stevens, did you have anything? Let's see. Coming through the portal.
Oh, get that. It's the day share vegetables.
Why say that? Pretty good. How you doing, Coach? Sweet. Great. We're waiting on you right here. Take your time. Let's see. Good to see you. You're up to that. You can't help it.
We just get started, boys. And I was looking at, was trying to do some quick amendments to our agenda. Did you have any other items today that you want to bring up, add to the agenda for discussion purposes?
Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, so everything's satisfied under 6B, so we can mark that on. We can also, you can mark off number 2 on your agenda for today. This Caraway can't be with us. So that brings us back to the start of our discussion with item 1.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I'm Jeff Tarnell. I'm a part-time field rep for North Carolina Department of Agriculture, Farmland Preservation. And, I know Boy Steve for years, his family, went to school, got all the same friends, but I wanted to, me and him were talking one day, and I said, I just like to talk to you good folks up here, and I'm not real formal. I rubbed off on voice right here a little bit. I like to just keep it really calm. And I don't like to read notes and try to talk because I'll stumble around. Dyslexic, I'm not gonna say anything backwards. So, but what I like to say is I'm proud of Jackson County. The leadership you've got. It's a beautiful county. It's a beautiful, beautiful county. It's beautiful, beautiful people. And that's what farmland preservation is about, protecting the county land and the county farm families, which everybody's connected to farming. I've seen tomatoes out, I see sweet corn in the back, I'll be like, I can't get on both ends. I mean, Lord have mercy, the market's busted out here. Anyway,
That's a good thing.
that's a good thing. But anyway, you've got a great farm, you've got a great county, and I want to say everything, and you've got great people working there. You've got great soil water people, Barry Stevens, and I want to let you know that we have farmland preservation. If we have grants available for people to apply for. Say, for example, I'm just gonna give a quick example. So you have a family that like to keep their farm in this family for decades. They can apply for farmland preservation, and we will help join the funds with either nonprofit entities like Soil and Water or Mainspring Land Trust, and we'll partner with funds to help get that in. And those cycles come up in September and go through December for next year. We also have projects for your school system, barns, anything to do with agricultural families, anything to do with the land, we can help sponsor projects. So I want to let you know, because I want to see Jackson County make sure they get the chance to get this funding if it's out there. We have a lot of counties that get it. Haywood County does really good, Buncombe County. The smaller counties, though, don't have the staffing maybe to do. So I just want to let you know, be aware of that, and I'll help. I'll be your advocate. I can go down there and jump on the table for Raleigh. I don't know what to do with it. I'll start training with you guys. You know, you got, and I think about it, I come across Dawson Gap, and the first thing I see is one of my favorite friends in the world is Gary Hall. You know Gary Hall? Where you got that big, beautiful pasture up on that mountain you see facing you right there, 100 acres. And I think that's where Heidi got went to get on. They read the story Heidi to me in the 3rd grade. I never got over Heidi going to the mountains and the grandpa getting well.
Yeah.
And I think Gary, just, you know, it just symbolized mountain people, you know, back to nature. We were back to nature long before it became popular. And so great families like Gary Hall, great families that come off of Pumpkin. Now I was thinking about the Francis or all the malls that's up on the upper end of the county or the Oranges over on Canada. I think about these beautiful families that migrated through these mountains. And one of my best jokes, boys, you know, you have to get these people on your side in Raleigh. You go down there and you'll see a 2,000 acre soybean farm, and everyone will know how big a spread we're farming up here. I'll really change the subject real quick. The county manager, I usually say, well, I don't know about that, but we got about 2.5 babies to the acre. And that's what I say we farm up here in the mountains. And that's about what we did in these mountains. We got great areas. So I'm here just to tell you briefly. You can read over this packet of information when I leave. If there's any funding we can do to help you, can't say you'll win funding, but I don't want you to be in the ball game. Can't win unless you're in the ball game, can't you, coach? You got to show up for your game, and I want to make sure y'all have all the opportunities for this great county. Because some people think if you serve with farmland, you'll value the farmland. But in some instances, like, I don't know, I like to own a farm in Napa Valley, wouldn't you? You know, Hillsborough County Park, all these farms are very valuable because they have production, but yet again, people like the ambiance of the farm, and then when they come and live in your county. I'm not going to sit here and bore you. I don't read to you, but I just off the top of my head, I'm sure I'm leaving something out. Thank you for letting me say a few words.
You talk about the amount of farmland some of these counties have lost.
Whether Jackson County lost 3% in the last decade of agricultural farmland. North Carolina is 30th in farmland, and it was second in loss. And so I think that takes me into a vector I want to talk about. You know, we've seen, you know, everything came out, this is talking above my pay level, but everything came out years ago to where, you know, economics at scale. I was down into a dairy farm down in Statesville, Shelton Dairy Farm, not Kenny Williams, but he was one of the people too. And they had a 2,000, they were built at 2,000 head dairy house. That's pretty big to me, 2,000.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at him, I said, gosh, how do you do it? It's Dr. Shelton. And he said, we can't compete. So what do you mean? He said, we're not big enough. He said, I'm competing with people milking 17,000 head. So what I'm saying here is we thought economics of scale, that the bigger everything got, we could lower unit cost of building everything. The problem is, we lose food security, don't we? Everything's jacked, you know, one end of the nation or the other, then all of a sudden, we got something happens and we don't have food stocked and feed supply. So it's so important that we keep these great lands up and down the Tuckasegee River or up on the mountains. You got two great soil types that come to the top of my head. You got me, you got Tuckasegee Whiteside. That's basically castures and all that great sandy loam. Then you got these great soils that come down the Tuckasegee River, and that's called Roslyn sandy loam. Now you think, well, gosh, Jeff, there's a lot of great soil everywhere. Well, the Roslyn sandy loam is the same soil that the Woods farm and Andrews farm. Same soil, the Boom Shell farm, same I farm, up there, same soil, they're alluvial soil, river form. And these soils, the Woods farm had a record non-irrigated corn yield many years in a row. I don't know if it's in a row, but many years, many times, east of the Mississippi River. I mean,
Yeah.
east of the Mississippi River, and that's a big chunk of the nation. Number one yielding corn, and they base soils off of corn yield. That's a common yield they use. So the number one was the Roslyn Silt Home and Andrews Valley. You got me the same one. So these may not be big tracts, but they're highly productive tracts. So if there's a way that you can use positive influence by helping people sell development rights, you won't lose those 3 or 4%, 10 years or maybe more. So down the road, and you know, as Abraham Lincoln, the struggle of the day is not all but for today. That we need another time, we need to be thinking for the next generation. They might need this food source because we might not be able to depend on other areas for all our commodities. Western North Carolina has got many places like that. And so, did I get at your question there?
Yeah. You know, we, Travis off Little Slant over there. The last dairy farm in this county, gave up to. There used to be a lot of dairy farms in this county. This wasn't a great dairy farm county, but there's several dairy farms here. And so the last one's gone over Haywood County, and there's still several pretty good sized at Lakeland County. Dairy farms, but they've lost any of them. Lose that. I put up a little bit of hay, every time you talk to somebody, hay bits, they walk to hay. They walk from there, talk to somebody. So we can go out. Don't think my job is right for a while. Lose all that. We got to think Nebraska weekend. They couldn't get over my cow around the house. You think Nebraska did. You know, there's people that come here, never see cows, they never see anything of that nature. No. And we lose something when we lose it. We don't get it back. And, it's important.
Well, you know, like a lot of times what happens to families, the farm families, is they have 3 or 4 people in the family, and one would be farming, or one stayed with the farm, maybe working on a job, and then the other 2, and then family, someone that died in the family, and they have to take care of the what's left, and they had to split it up to satisfy the people that were there. It's just common knowledge. And so what the Farmland Preservation started doing years ago was to try to give a chance to sell the development rights. And the development right is one part of the farm. And you can have state that development rights, really, that's right for housing and farm areas. But it gave a chance to people to source money without selling the farm, so they could distribute the money to the other areas of the land, so the farm could stay together. That's kind of one of the principal starts of the farmland preservation. So I just, you got Bill Gibson. He put his own. He's one of Bill. He's the smartest thing I've ever been around. But he put his farm in. They said he was the quickest one to ever put in. He's got a beautiful farm done. I know you've been on Bill's farm, and it's just, I just want to make sure that all these people up through this area have a chance to go for this money. Because you all have you got great leaders, you got great area. And I love it, man. I love everybody. I love people come in too, but I just want to make sure we maintain the whole essence of what we are. And I just want to come up, run my mouth a little bit, let y'all know about it.
I'll tell you what another sad part about it also is a lot of times the kids grow up and they want to be doctors or whatever, and they move away, and then the parents die and there's nobody there to run the farm.
That's right.
That's
So,
a-
and we got a lot of kids that grow up, we don't have an opportunity to farm, so there are programs now that the state's doing where we have young people who want to farm, and there's farmland, land like over at Buncombe County. Who's all ever been to Sandy Much? I tell people going to Cage Cove, I said, you go on to Cage Cove, if you want to see something pretty, go to Sandy Much. To me, it's beautiful. And it's a working farm, so there's programs out there to help people, these young people who want to farm. They're actually great farmers.
Right.
And to get tied back to some of that land that's being preserved. So that's the other programs. We got a lot of things going like that, and we got a lot of people thinking they're not there. So I just wanted to take it. I don't know how I live in Whittier and farm. My kids farm down in Swain County, and I've been part of that community, but I don't get up this way much. But if anybody needs any talking, if you want to talk to anybody about anything like this, let me know, and I'll be glad to get with you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Yes, ma'am.
I did have one question. You mentioned something about barn preservation. Is there funding to preserve old barns?
I don't, not directly in this project,
Okay.
but if you were to put the farm in and you wanted it to be in the, if you wanted the barn to be part of the soil and the barn that would preserve it, it would be preserved by that.
Okay.
Okay, so we're basically preserving the families and preserving the soil. The soil is
Yes.
what we're after, because we got some great soil.
I know, a lot is said about farmland preservation.
Mhm.
But is there ever a discussion about creating farmland?
Creating farmland.
Yeah.
We're restoring
Now,
farmland.
are you talking about Gary Hall?
Yeah.
Gary and I related.
Are you?
Yeah, his grandfather and, well, his great grandfather and my grandfather were the same person, so.
Yeah.
And I know Round Top,
Yeah.
and I know, that was cut out, those trees was cut out on that knoll and made it into a farm. Is anybody even think about, or has anybody ever talked about farmland creation?
Well, I don't know if this answer your question. A lot of people who have land like this, I know that you mentioned Smart over there at Dairy Farms. They will actually buy a farm, apply, put it in, preserve it, then they'll take that money out of the next farm. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So in an indirect way, you could, and just a hypothetical, someone like a Gary could put some of his land in, you could take that money and buy the next farm to it. And we like that because there's a scoring system. You go on the website and get scored, and we make sure it's a fair scoring system. We're really hard to make sure everybody's treated equal. But one thing we like to do is tie easements together so it's a working area. You know what I'm saying? We like to have working areas. If you come into Kentucky seems you'd see a working area of different farms working together, different tracts of land. So that's happened a lot. You know, I was down in Lincoln County, and a guy down there bought a tract of land, 20, 30 acres, not a lot, and he's in the winery business, and he put a mustard vineyard in there. Got enough, you know, got pretty good off the money to help with the vineyard. He left an acre out the middle of it for his daughter, and he said, man, that's gonna be an acre of land right in the middle of a vineyard. And then he said, yeah, it's about 40 miles from Charlotte. I said, man, there'll be every surgeon in the world want that piece of land. You know what I'm saying? By inference, people used to want to live on a golf course, but you can tell them in Apple Valley that some people like to live around vineyards. So there's a way to work this thing where it helps the bag, helps the Gary Hole. I'm just thinking Gary may not want me to use the thing, but I probably shouldn't, because it's a different brand of mine. Those plow picking thing. But when it comes down, we have plow days, you know, they boys are great teamsters. I don't know, it's been a while since you worked the mule lately, boys. Might Gary get one down here, but anyway, that's a little bit. I'm starting to fall off the subject. I can talk too much. I don't want to leave you. I always want to leave you wanting more. So the county manager will tell me to get out of the way. Or the chairman tells me you had enough. If you have any other questions, let me know.
Any other questions?
Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you for being great leaders. And let me know any way we can help you. Thank you, county manager and all the staff. And I'll just go ahead and exit the room, okay?
Yes, sir.
So you all can talk about me, all right?
We do, but you know, this is the.
Here, I won't leave another.
I appreciate it. Thanks, sir.
Okay, I guess item 3, Mr. Maxwell.
Yes, sir. We do have Mr. Travis Lewis here with staff by, and he's here. One of his leases for his tower up on King.
Yeah, it's hard to believe it's been almost 6 years since I've been before the board.
Oh, my goodness.
So we started 6 years ago. We're up to over 1,200 customers in Jackson County. We've got probably, our sister company has 1,200 customers in Swain. And we've got about 100 customers in Macon. So we're trying to take care of, but one of the things that's important to us is, of course, is our power locations or agreement. We've got, in Jackson County, we've got 10 locations that are up and functioning at this point. 3 that I own, 2 county property, and then the rest are private leases where we put different antennas. And of course, the agreement, it's up for renewal on Kings Mountain. And that services several, I'd say it's probably 25% of our business, 20% maybe. I don't remember the exact numbers. But we'd like to go for another 5-year lease, continue what we're doing. And with a 5-year option, I think if that's right, in that it,
You can do that.
like a 5-year option. If the board sees fit for that, I appreciate the consideration. Some exciting things to come.
I did communicate with Mr. Gilbert, who provides oversight to our other tower and things of that nature at on Kings Mountain, and had nothing but complimentary things to say about you, Travis, as far as being a good partner out there and keeping your site clean and keeping everything running. So
Yeah, I mean, we keep it up, and this tower location also serves as a 911 backup. We allow the county's on our tower, but no charge to the county or anything. But we feed a signal from the courthouse here to Kings Mountain down to 911, and that's just strictly for backup in case the 911 went up. And that's on that tower. We do some other things throughout the county. We provide the internet there for no charge, just doing that. And then we do little things in some of the fire department, Koala Fire Department, at the West Piney Mountain. I've got internet there for them at no charge. We do some cameras and we do some community projects where we offer free Wi-Fi. In the parking lot of the Save More, we've got a free Wi-Fi text program up there that we do. We just installed some at the Locust Creek area and Parker Creek. And we don't charge anything for those things. So, I'm trying to help our community.
So,
Power off.
Yeah, I own that one. That's one of mine that's I personally own that.
How about,
Oh,
how much do I have to create? Up and down.
so I don't have anything on
I
public.
know that we got gifts on those. People up there.
Pumpkin Town is one of those areas, the way the whole valley shapes, it's pretty much Steep Mountain on one side, and Steep Mountain on the other. It's hard to get a wireless signal in there. But there's some good funding coming. Hopefully the charter does what they promised on RDOF. And if they do that, they're going to take up some of these census blocks that are not touched. I think they were awarded, if my numbers are right, somewhere around, they got $70 million.
Yeah.
And it's yet to be determined whether they're going to do it or not. There's some other funding coming from NCDIT, and $1.2 billion is going to be for the state of North Carolina. They're going to set aside $650 million for fiber. So the governor wants in the next 4 years, 98% of the homes to have fiber. That's a big goal. I don't think it's going to. It may happen in the eastern part, but the western part is going to be harder to achieve that. So then they got some what they call bridge the gap. That's for companies like myself. That's to get relief to they get actual fiber guys. So we're going to actually Skyfile. My company's going to actually transition into doing some fiber to the home in the next year. And hopefully this new money coming down in Jackson County, we can get some of that. Help out. So,
We still have a problem like these.
East Coast groups, we get that distance service. Some of it's, we've got a lot of customers on East Coast group. Where Jackson County has some problems are it's 281 Campbell, up in that area, in the Tuckasegee area. We've applied for an ARC grant to start some infrastructure in the remaining part of Tuckasegee. And what that will allow us to do is, once we get that hub, is to branch out from there. So that's up in the air, we'll see. And a lot of these state grant things, they're waiting to see what the federal requirements are. I know that Jackson County had some problems with the NITA money. I don't know if that's the right initials, about how to use it and how to fund it.
So we do have some, we're talking about this a little bit, when we talk about the ARPA funds. We do have some restrictions in the state law in regards to being able to use federal and state dollars to go towards this discussion. Meaning, we cannot take federal dollars and turn around, say Jackson County can't get a federal grant for broadband, and then turn around and grant it to Travis or to Boston West or to anybody, because we're restricted to only utilizing our own general fund dollars. And even when we use those dollars, we have to go through an extensive request for proposal process. So hopefully a lot of those funds that are coming through the state will go directly to the provider, and that will remove us from being the middle person there. But until that law and those little caveats are changed, we missed an opportunity that we had our new economic developer really working with, that was potentially up to a $5 million federal grant opportunity. Just for the simple fact that we cannot take those federal dollars. It had to be a county or municipality applying for these funds at a federal level. We could not take those dollars and transfer them to to a private company. So that is the significant issue that we have. Travis, that's what we ran into when I first got here, when Rich Price, when y'all were working on the ARC grant.
Yeah.
You remember, and that was gonna come to the county, and we ran into that. This ARC grant is gonna be directly,
It's the one to Southwestern Resource.
Southwest, yeah. And
So,
I do have a question about, so you said that we could have applied for several $1 million and we couldn't because we couldn't give that money to a private provider?
Correct.
How could we have used the money?
we couldn't use it.
Well, that just seems ridiculous to offer it and then not have, because we're not allowed by law to
In North-
create infrastructure
in
as
North
as county
Carolina.
government.
there's a few counties have applied for it, and they're skirting along. So, I mean, I know Swain's applied for it, maybe, and if they get it, they're just
They can-
hoping they're not gonna be sued.
They can apply, because at one point we understood, we were working legally with their legal team.
They back out.
And then Swain,
They actually decided to do it, they'll deal with it if they get it, they're gonna work through
are
it.
they going through?
Yeah.
And so it was a last minute, it was one of those things
Yeah.
that we're getting legal opinions on that.
So how, I don't understand how they.
It's a federal grant, so
Yeah.
it's not the state of North Carolina who, the laws are North Carolina laws that prohibit us from being able to use it once we receive it. But the
Oh.
funds are a federal grant,
I see.
so we can
Okay.
apply from the federal, but then we couldn't use it due to
Okay.
North Carolina law.
Okay.
And it was relatively, there are some things that Jackson County needs to go through, request for proposal, extensive process to even be able to utilize funds under our current laws
Okay.
that I'm working with Tiffany on. But I think my point is where we're at on that. And I understand they can skirt the laws all they want, but I have to go by what.
Oh, I know,
is telling
I
me.
know they're skirting the law.
Yeah.
They know they're skirting the law.
Right.
And so we have to go by what legal counsel is telling us. And I only point that out because we're still dealing with these issues that counties have been dealing with for a very long time. And that is the state of North Carolina.
What was helping me
Significantly
out,
restricts our
We're trying to get that
ability
changed.
to utilize any fund,
Yeah.
to utilize federal funds, state grant dollars. It restricts our ability to utilize those funds to participate in these activities. When I sit and talk to you about ARPA funds, when we have this discussion later, that's literally what I was about to tell you, what we're talking about now, is that I'm gonna recommend we hold off discussing ARPA funds to going towards broadband infrastructure development for two reasons. One is we need to see what all these other funds are doing. And then two is that we don't have the legal capability of expending those funds on broadband.
so back to the state grants.
Yes.
That the NCDIT offers.
Yes.
And, that's, so what happens is we apply, it's a scoring system, something like the gentleman before me was talking about, Mr. Darnell. So everybody applies and it's scored based on number of customers served, the type of internet that's being provided, whether it be wireless or fiber, it's different scores, and cost. And, what helps, let's say that I was applying and I got a grant for $1 million. So I had to come up with 35% of it and back the rest of the $1 million. So basically I had to have $1.3 million sitting there to get that $1 million grant. Or be backed. I don't really need no funds from the county. I just need some energy to back the grant that we get. And some counties have backed those NCDIT grants and some counties don't. And I don't know if ours would consider doing some of those backings. It's no money out of your pocket. It's just saying, I guess what it is if Travis doesn't perform, then the county's on the hook for it.
Yeah.
But, we were #1 in the grant that we got. We were #1 in finishing the grant. We were the only company that finished the grant 2 years. In the same North Carolina that got it.
I got the whole state.
Yeah, there were in the first round, there were 17 companies that got it. Our grant was #1 as far as the way it's written, and that's from Southwestern Resource Commission, really put a lot of effort into helping us write that grant. And we had two years to perform it. We got ours done And we were supposed to serve 300 customers. We took that money and served over 550 customers. So that made us number one in performance. And we were the only company that finished on the 2-year con, the rest of it did extensions. So we're done with that.
Well, we have Sky-Fi now, we put that new tower up. I live on that kind of gap.
It comes off out, yours comes off out.
And we are so pleased with it. We have been very pleased with the service, it's consistent, and it's strong. We had Frontier for over 20 years, and it was awful. So we have been so pleased to have Sky-Fi.
Right.
Yes.
But our goal is to expand. It takes every dollar that we make. My accountant told me that I need to start showing a profit in the future. But there's no way. I mean, because if we have $70,000 a month coming in or 80, we spend $80,000 a month to get people in. That's what we're spending.
Thank you so much.
You all do a great job.
Yes.
So,
Other questions about the leases? Put this on the upcoming agenda.
We'll need to, we have to advertise for 30 days, so we can I'll figure out with their clerk what timing works.
Okay.
It's not upset their process, you just have to give notice by advertisement.
I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Thank
We'll see y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Travis, do you want to take care of 6A? Yes, sir. And the rest of our discussion today will be all ARPA.
Yes, sir. So, yes, request, just a reminder to the board did approve, full-time, 2 new full-time positions for our 2 rescue squads in the county. We did receive a request from Glenville Pastures Rescue Squad, to basically, they're requesting to receive the funds directly so that they can employ this position directly in lieu of it being a county position. They have the capability of doing this. The reason they do is because we contract with them to provide EMS services for the county, so they already have payroll services and things of that nature set up. And they just feel like if they're able to receive the funds directly, that they would be able to, basically pay for the position. And meet their needs more directly. I guess we just need it in there. Darlene, did you have that page? So I asked Darlene to go ahead and put together what that would actually mean as far as funding goes. The position itself is starting pay is $30,988. You bring in all the benefits associated with that. That's health insurance, FICA, retirement, Medicare. That's an additional $21,191. So that position costs the county $54,179. So ultimately, at minimum, that's what we're going to be paying out for the Jackson County Rescue Squad for that position. So the request from the Glenville Pastures Rescue Squad would be to transfer those funds to them for them to be able to meet their needs.
I don't have a problem. Anybody else have a problem? But good, let's work on us.
At the end of the day, I would expand that out to any of our nonprofit organizations if they have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Now the other ones don't have payroll services already set up, and things of that nature, so it could end up costing more money to do that. But if they ever evolve to that, then it is to
Questions and final questions off. What kind of action would be required?
I think really it's a budget thing. I mean, we need to do a budget thing. I think I would like to. We could do it. I still would like the board to just like to do this, so it's on record. So if we could put this on the next meeting. So however the board wishes to proceed, unless you have to recess this, we can go through these topics too, if you wish to.
That's it. However y'all want to proceed, I don't really care.
Because I am open, the way I've set this up, you have a tab 5 now in your packets, that's in relation to the ARPA discussion. And part of those discussions will be, you're not walking away here, obviously, with any votes today in this meeting, but part of those discussions will be the recess meeting from last August 3rd. So, if the police board, we just go ahead and fix this meeting.
Down there at the bottom, under the, there's TTS.
So what I'm gonna get Arlene is first.
This is the grant project ordinance for the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds. That's for the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And what the grant ordinance does is creates a budget for the revenue and expenditures of funds and sets the time limit that the ordinance runs from now, from March 3rd, 2021 to December 31st, 2026. And the total amount is $8,534,441. And we have received the first payment of the $4,267,220. Also specifies 5 items that the money can be used for during the term. And this sets the total expenditure budget, but when you decide how it's funded, we'll come back with amendments to board for the use of those funds.
So Commissioner Wood, you'd sent an email, did from the school government blog.
Yes, thank you.
Appreciate actually forwarding it to me. I was able to refer back. I
Oh,
went and
okay.
found that. I was looking at other things in there.
Yeah, I was just reading through that and I thought, oh, yeah, here it is.
So what I just gave you was, you recall, you actually did a revenue vote back June 1st. And that's not today, but you already voted on that. And so the paragraph you were referring to in the email that you sent was 2 things. One was authorizing the finance officer, accepting the money and authorizing the finance officer, county manager to proceed forward. Well, that's what that you did at June 1st.
Okay.
And then the second part of that paragraph in that blog that you forwarded to me talks about budgeting funds.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing, what we're asking the board to do. So yes, you were right on.
Yeah, but I had, to be honest, I had not remembered that we did that first step, so.
Well, really, but you were right on it. That was part of, and this is the
Yeah.
second step of that paragraph.
So this will be an item that we would need to vote on at our next meeting. Is there any requirements for any kind of public hearings?
No.
Okay, so it's just a simple majority approval. Okay, where will this money be now? What's the, we'll hold the funds.
Well, we've got the fund, half of the funds.
Yeah.
In hand, and they're set up as a deferred revenue. So when you budget, what you want to use the funds from, they'll be moved. That's it.
But interest bearing.
Received the money, just curious.
Was toward the last of June.
This basically allows us to survive multiple budget years. It's just putting the money, budgeting the money in a place that hopefully will allow it to continue on year to year. And then it also keeps from the county perspective, keeps it separate from our other. Board, it starts choosing where the money goes. What you do is when you see the following amount appropriated for the project, we'll start dividing that out a little bit in regards to where you decide that money goes.
So the rest of the money will be 12 months from time, next June, this year.
Yes.
Any other questions about this, grant project ordinance?
So the next item I have here, and, this has been put online too, but if you go to tab 5, it does say that you go to tab 5 in the books, you'll have a copy of what I'm looking to discuss with the board today. And this does, this will basically transition into the next discussion when you reconvene the August 3rd meeting. And so, and just if, for the board's information, I know a lot of this you already know, but a lot of times when I write this stuff, I also try to just revisit and give a little bit of history. Since this stuff goes online, the public sees it, it helps for them to have some of the background information, which sometimes seems like we're talking about over and over. But this is really just as much for the public as it is for you. So as you can see in the memo that I've sent to you, March 11th, the American Rescue Plan Act was signed into law by the president. It set aside $130.2 billion aside for being split between municipalities and counties, 65.1 directly allocated to counties based upon population, another 1.5 distributed evenly to revenue share counties. So obviously the money or what we just discussed, the project ordinance, Jackson County will receive a total of $8,534,441 from the federal government under this act. We have to have, Jackson County must have these funds obligated by December 31st, 2024, and the funds must be expended by December 31st, 2026. The Treasury published a 151-page interim final rule regarding the expenditure of these funds. We're expecting the final rules to come out anytime, sometime in the month of August or September. And so one of my recommendations is we need to get those final rules before we spend any of this money.
Yeah.
Obviously, now, we don't expect them to come and make any drastic changes on those rules, but still, to be safe, we need to see the final rules. The other thing I want to mention while we're talking about rules of these funds, when we start talking about construction projects and things of that nature, especially if they're things we're doing directly, we're going to have to, this whole process, we're going to have to get more guidance and more rules from them in regards to, if we're going to go out and construct a facility. Well, I've constructed facilities that have been part of constructed facilities under EDA grants and CDBG grants, which is technically federal dollars. Generally speaking, there's, especially making free money without rules, generally speaking, there will be a bunch of guidance coming down on how you have to proceed forward and actually spend those funds. And we will need to make sure that we get appropriate guidance on how to spend every dollar. And so ultimately, it's requested that the board begin discussing potential uses for these funds. And my intent here is to try to just give some guidance and some starting of these discussions. So the following provides information on eligible uses for these funds. If you you'll notice I put ... I didn't write the entire thing for each one of these. So if you look at number 1, respond to public health emergency or negative economic impacts. If you go back to your project ordinance, it'll tell you every word of that first item. Well, what I want to let the board know, this seems to be the broadest category that provides for the most potential uses for the funds. It's under this category, we're funding human services programs that are allowable. You're talking about what they they have done is, it's a category where the county can look to assist other nonprofits and businesses who have been negatively impacted. Number two is to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency. These funds are more restricted than our previous funds in the sense that it only can be associated with essential workers that are specifically defined. It cannot be across the board initiatives such as the previous bonus pay given to all county employees. The third item is a provision of government service to the extent of reduction of revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency. This is the most limited use of these funds for us. And basically, that's because the interim guidance issue requires system-wide revenue to be evaluated. And our sales taxes, as we all know, our sales tax have been increasing through the last couple of years, and it's really offset our other revenue. So, for example, recreation. We were allowed to really segment out our different operations. You know, recreation has lost quite a bit of revenue. When we shut down, we weren't getting our daily fees. We basically weren't getting new annual fees, things of that nature. And it equated to quite a bit of money, but we're not allowed to separate that out. And so, unfortunately, in this category, our sales taxes really offset our ability to use this to replace revenues. The fourth item is to make the necessary investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. That's the paragraph I mentioned earlier that we're very limited at this point under these provisions. We are highly restricted on how we can invest due to state law. We're not able to utilize any funds other than our general funds to invest in broadband. And even if the board chose to do that, you have to go through an extensive request for proposals to even go down that route. It's recommended to hold off on these discussions to see if state law will change. There are also some other potential resources that may become available direct to the private providers. Travis will sit here naming a few of those. And then finally, Jackson County does not operate water or sewer. So under that category, we're somewhat limited. We can at another meeting talk about some of the state laws that are out there that can maybe open up our ability for broadband, but it just doesn't exist as of today. So if you scroll on down or going down, it's recommended that the county initiates several processes and move forward with our ARPA planning and eventual expenditure. There's as follows. As stated before, plan to contribute funds towards human services functions. As stated in previous meetings, the federal government has determined that social issues such as mental health, substance abuse, family, and individual assistance programs have all been negatively impacted by the pandemic. Therefore, human services activities may be eligible for ARPA appropriations. You read over these things several times and you still don't catch it there. Jackson County, this is not new for us. We're already in partnerships, either direct funded or partnerships in providing human services activities. So we attempt to address these issues in a variety of ways. And what I'm trying to do is detail some of the known and future ARPA partnership opportunities related to human services programs. So it's been requested, as will be discussed today, that the board dedicate up to $2.5 million towards the matching Dogwood Health Trust grant funds to go towards the construction of a domestic violence shelter and a homeless shelter. If you recall, I also mentioned earlier, weight was the third component in some of these conversations. WAIT provides assistance for child abuse victims and so forth. They are currently working on, they have a facility they're working and trying to, they need some renovations done to that facility. Now, I can tell you the costs that we're talking about are nowhere near what we're talking about as far as construction of the new domestic violence shelter. But they are looking, they're acquiring some property now, and they're looking to renovate. And ultimately, we could be looking to $100,000 to $200,000, just put a number, $100,000 to $200,000 number that eventually come back to the board. But they are looking to come back. The funds or other funds, I'm just letting you know that this is a request that eventually come back to this board. And then finally, there's develop a nonprofit application process that other agencies provide a human services program. You know, as stated before, you know, we do have social services and we do have health department. We do provide human services programming, but we partner. One of the values of our nonprofits is we partner with a lot of different nonprofits that provide these human services functions for us. And so I do believe instead of, I don't have all the, I mean, personally, I don't have all the answers or all the ideas out there of what could be done best to help serve this population group. So I am proposing that we have an application process and invite these nonprofit groups to come in and give us proposals, give the county proposals. So scrolling on down to number 2, I'm also talking about developing a nonprofit application process that allows for other requests that fall in that allow for uses under ARPA. You know, ARPA can be used to assist small businesses and nonprofits who have been impacted by COVID-19. It allows aid to be provided to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, hospitality. See, the county has certain restrictions. So some people might say, well, small businesses has been impacted. Well, we can't, as a county, we can't turn around and just take money and directly give it to a small business without following certain state laws. Okay, there are certain restrictions that Jackson County has to follow, or laws that makes it not as simple as just giving a business a $500 grant. But we do have other nonprofits out there, and this will have to be vetted legally. But we do have other nonprofits out there and other groups, chamber of commerce and so forth, that do have interactions with these small businesses that could have concepts and ideas that would be, quite frankly, more impactful than us just giving somebody a $500 check. So I would challenge those types of groups to come to the board and give concepts and ideas to us. And then also, for example, the other example that I give is TWAFA. You know, some of this money can't go to water and sewer. You know, it does have to be related to the impacts of COVID. But again, if we open up a generalized nonprofit application process, well, TWAFA pick up talk. But then that's something they have to come and talk to you and sell and meet in regards to that. So finally, jumping down to 3, to continue our workforce and affordable housing discussions. ARPA funds may be eligible to assist in these matters depending upon the proposal. And I'm not prepared to discuss with the board today, but there are some specific projects going on right now, discussions occurring, that could impact our workforce housing and housing opportunities. And it really, if you recall, it's more complex than how I'm about to state it, but practically all housing issues come down to land costs. It doesn't matter if you're looking at trying to develop a low-income housing apartment complex to some type of housing program where you're doing single-family housing, where you're trying to develop for middle-income people to build a house. At the end of the day, when you come down to what barriers that you ask these nonprofit, a lot of times nonprofit work companies, what barriers are they dealing with? It comes down to cost of land and site development, really, to make it the programs affordable. There are issues being worked on right now, and if we will just reserve our thoughts and invite those folks to come and talk to us when they're ready, then I believe we'll have some good opportunities presented to us. And then I did put forward, as far as receive additional input and direction from the Board of Commissioners on any other initiative eligible to be funded with ARPA. And I want to go ahead and put something on your radar that I meant to put on in writing here, and I forgot to. There is one issue that was discussed at budget time, and it was presented, and I mentioned it to the board, that the sheriff came to the board requesting funding for a video camera system. That's a camera system for the deputies, for the vehicles. It's the integrated system that is with the company called Axon. Well, ultimately, we do believe under the interim rules right now, and again, we need to wait till the final rules to make sure we understand this. We can fund certain safety functions with these funds. Okay. so that is a $1.2 million request over a 4-year period approximately from the sheriff. And so I do want to put that out, because once we get final ruling on this, if this is something that I believe there was interest, I believe there's feedback to the sheriff that there's interest from the board to assist and for us to evolve into that camera system that we're talking about. And if that is the case, as soon as the interim ruling comes out, we will probably be coming back to the board to discuss utilizing these funds to help us with that. And so that is if you look at the time period, we have the time periods almost match up with the 4-year contract that we're talking about with Axon providing. And then after that time period, that would be a cost that the county would assume after that. And then finally, just my last paragraph, just a reminder, everybody, that all proposals have to follow the eligible guidelines. And the real point that I'm trying to make with that paragraph, I'm not going to read it verbatim, is the point we've somewhat discussed today. Just because the federal government says it's an eligible expense doesn't mean that we as Jackson County can actually spend it on certain items, i.e. broadband. So the real point here is I just want everybody to understand that we're going to do requests for proposals. If the board chooses to do so, we'll get all of these ideas sent to you. But the reality is we have to get a legal opinion on all of these things on a case-by-case basis. I just want to make sure everybody understands that before we go down this road. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back over to the board.
This item was on the work session agenda as a very basic, broad, general review of the ARPA funds and what they're available to be used for. Any other questions about this broad, general view? There'll be more to come, obviously.
My question really is that I actually you guys, if there's not question about the specifics, I would like to get some feedback if I could about going down the line of requests for proposals for nonprofits. Because if the board's interested in that, I can start developing those for the next work session.
Do we want to give consideration to looking at the overall funds and then divide those funds up and like percentages? We'd be willing to do a certain amount towards nonprofits or a certain amount towards this item. Sometimes people do that with funds, or do we just leave it open, use it first come, first served? Does that make sense?
Yes, except that from what Mr. Adams is saying, we have to have some direction for expenditure, knowing that they would have to comply with the regulations of this act. The
Yeah.
guidelines, because otherwise, if we don't have that, they might be like, yeah, we need a new freezer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
guess, I think what I'm saying is, I wouldn't want to expend 100% or even 80% of the funds to nonprofits.
Oh, no, I
But I
see.
think that should be a percentage. We ought to
Yes.
hold
I
back
see.
some to give to those nonprofits, but there are other things that we want to consider. I think we want to look broad.
Yes,
We don't want to focus all our money just on one item.
I think you're right.
Because there's a lot of things that need attention, and I think it'd be great to do the shotgun approach where you're giving them money to spread it out.
Yes,
As opposed to say, well, we're just going to fund this one.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's what you're attempting to do by having these categories.
That's where,
Yeah.
if you make some consensus or decisions even today, that starts the process of dividing the funds up.
So just like, and we'll get into further discussions here in a minute, we reconvene the other meeting. You take 2.5 million away from the 8 or whatever it is. That's a significant number of it. How much of that do we take out for this block of items? And how much do we reserve for this block? And I guess that's what you think of.
Are you interested in the application process?
Yes.
The reason I said is because what I can plan on doing for our next work session, again, maybe we'll have guidance by then, but I can bring back to the next work session some sample application process, and we can start having that conversation again, in regards to how do we divide the funds up. And then also start the process of, okay, how do we ask for, or how do we set up a process for requesting them?
The for simplicity, fair statement to say, based on our budget and yearly budget for the county, we take the percent of what we give to charities. Just as a, maybe a starting point there.
Maybe.
So I think the next issue I'm going to bring to everybody when we start doing the nonprofit activity versus spreading it out versus looking bigger. The next discussion I think is going to be, are you want to spread it out or you want to make bigger bang with it, a bigger impact with results? And I think that's what you're doing. So ultimately, what that does in my mind is that really starts getting into the details of the application process. And so what I mean by that is ultimately, you can make minimum. You could do a maximum of $1 million, make minimum, ultimately we can have all of those types of conversations. And I believe what you're talking about, and let's just use, we spend about $500,000 a year on nonprofits. That's what we spend. So, if you're trying to use that type of process, you can just, and that doesn't include, just so you know, fire departments and things of that nature. That really is our nonprofits, the mixture of them. You can, even if you use that number, that almost doubles that. That's assuming you're going to spread it out. The question becomes, you may have a couple of these nonprofits that have, they may have $100,000 idea, $200,000 idea, and I think ultimately the discussion with the board has to be, are you interested in smaller grants or larger or a combination? And are you trying to make significant impact versus smaller impact? And I don't think we really know that until we see the application.
Yeah. And I would have a tendency to give maybe more points or prioritize those that are accessing these funds to get more funds. Like this whole proposal with Dogwood Health Trust, that 2-point-something million. But that's accessing that much more money. So we're maximizing their money. And anytime these nonprofits could use this money to leverage more funding, that will maximize everything. So is that a thought of consideration?
So you're looking at what the impacts
Yes.
are, how do they?
No,
What's that?
Dogwood something. Dogwood.
That's a health center.
Is that what that
That's
is?
a
Right
doctor.
there before the
Yes.
road? Okay.
Yeah, that's on my road.
I got, okay.
Well, it's not my road, but the road I live on. I pick up the trash on that road.
Yeah, I think
It's my road.
I think you're going down the right idea as far as
Okay.
how do you double the money?
Yes.
Then you gotta start talking about longevity of the
Leverage,
program.
yes.
In
Longevity.
regards to, you guys started going down this pathway a little bit with the Center for Domestic Peace and hear about continuing funding, how you're gonna pay for the operations. I think you have to consider all of that. And so, somebody who walks in this door and asks for 5 people, and everything is operational driven with no ability to fund it after 2 years or 3 years, ultimately, I don't necessarily know that's gonna look as strong to you as somebody walking in with multiple partnerships on how to fund their operations over your time.
Yeah, it sounds like we need one. Okay, so we're at the end of this work session agenda. Let me ask a technical question for the next meeting. We recessed the last meeting second time. The first time recess, is there?
Yeah, there's, come up from my ability to show what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You have to minimize, or just go back to the Google thing at the bottom. And then.
So under Dogwood Health Trust opportunity, I actually went ahead and put the attachment.
Very good, all right. So we have no need to go into closed session when we go back into this other, we can just go straight into open session. Okay. All right, do I have a motion that we adjourn the work session?
So be it.
Second.
All right, motion and a second, all in favor, say aye. Okay. And I know Commissioner Woody has a traveling today, so we will try to get this started and get finished as quick as possible. So we'll go ahead and I'll call back to order the recess meeting. It's been recessed twice now. It was recessed a few minutes earlier today before the start of the work session. And item of business for discussion would be item 4, the agenda that was published on August 3rd, Dogwood Health Trust.
So again, I believe I made that comment earlier. A lot of this information is known by the board, but the desire here is to try to provide as much information, not just to the board, but also to the public. So as you can see, this is online now. We've created an additional item, and we'll go ahead and bring that up online. And you should have in front of you the a physical copy that was handed out with this information. And so what's behind that is also multiple attachments. And so what I'd like to do is just go through my manager summary of everything here. What this is this is a proposal for a grant application to Dogwood Health Trust Fund. And just I'll go through that. So as you can see in my memo, the first paragraph is referring to the Dogwood Health Trust Fund releasing that grant opportunity. So I did put in attachment 1. This is something you've already seen at previously a couple different board meetings. Hopefully attachment 1 does show you the grant opportunity being discussed. So I'm gonna try not to scroll up and down. It's in the packets and we've already seen that information. I just want to make sure everybody. So again, this is something that has been previously discussed. It's called the ARPA Advantage Affordable Housing Fund Opportunity. A total of $10 million is available for that initiative, and individual requests may range from $500,000 to $2.5 million. This grant opportunity is specific to counties and municipalities and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians only. The grant application deadline is due 5 p.m. August 16th. Awards will be made by the end of September and funds available October 1st. There are 2 main opportunities, or 2 major opportunities for Jackson County with these funds. These opportunities include serving domestic violence victims and serving homeless in Jackson County. Jackson County currently partners with the Center for Domestic Peace and here to serve these population groups. And a detailed description of each is as follows. Just one of the things I want to let everybody know, we've had a long history of partnering with groups in both of these services. And so I'm trying not to read this verbatim with you, but I'm also trying to show the public this is not a new conversation as it relates to domestic violence and the county's partnerships with groups. Jackson County been working with nonprofits. The county's main partner from the year 1978 till 2012 was Reach of Jackson County. So that is a very long history. The Reach needs resources, education, assistance, counseling, and housing. Reach of Jackson County discontinued their services in 2012, but understanding the value of it, then county leaders in 2012 immediately worked out an arrangement with Reach of Macon County to take over these services for domestic violence and sexual assaults in Jackson County. This included providing temporary shelter space when needed. So recognizing the need to bring the services back, community leaders organized a task force in 2012 to study these issues. The Center for Domestic Abuse was created out of this task force and became incorporated in December of 2013. The CDP, the Center for Domestic Abuse, has worked closely with the Macon County since then to transition these services back to Jackson County. Domestic violence services transition to CDP, or Jackson County Services, as of July 1, 2020. The CDP will take over sexual assault and human trafficking services July of 2022. The final phase of this transition will be providing shelter services directly in Jackson County. Attachment 2 provides information from the CDP regarding the need and justice review shelter. This is the information that was presented to you by Mr. Myers. So again, I'm not going to scroll down to it. It's information you've received, but it's also online for the public to see. So jumping to the next page, it's proposed that Jackson County apply to the Dogwood Health Trust ARP Advantage program to fund construction of a new domestic violence shelter in Jackson County. Attachment 3 provides information regarding the property being considered for the location. Now, I'll advise everybody to look away. I am going to scroll down so that people who are watching on YouTube will see this while we're discussing this. So I'm going to scroll down to attachment 3. Okay. So attachment 3 provides information regarding the property being considered, and so I do have up on the screen so that people can see at home. For the location of this shelter, the property is owned by Mountain Projects, is located in Silva Town limits off of Plum Street near Highway 107 East Main Street. The parcel consists of 2.27 acres. The parcel is currently being used by Mountain Projects for other housing programs. This parcel is a former location of the previous shelter before it got torn down. Attachment 4, which is the next page in the packets. Attachment 4 is a zoning verification letter from the town of Silva indicating that this property is located in an institutional district that allows for a variety of by right uses, which includes shelter and group homes. Attachment 5. Attachment 5 is the proposed site plan for a 2-story, 7,000 square foot facility, along with additional parking required to serve a facility such as this. So just while I got it on the screen here, ultimately, this is our location. There's open area right here where this parking lot is. I just want everybody to know, again, this is for the board and people watching. This is some admin space on that property. This is the location of the current housing programs by Mountain Projects. And so if you scroll down to the proposed site plan is serving the current housing areas and then not disturbing the current admin space. But what it is doing is adding, this is a footprint of a 3,500 square foot. So it's proposed that this building be 2 stories, 7,000 square feet. And then we are talking about adding additional parking here to recover Mountain Projects lost parking. But also we have to have this amount of parking spaces to meet zoning requirements and also adequate service facility. Other things here to note on this property that's kind of hard to see unless you really zoom in. This property right where I'm scrolling is proposed to be fenced in for security purposes. There's a set of gates right here that would be locked off for just basically providing security for the victims utilizing this facility. And then this would be shared parking between both Mountain Projects and the operation of this facility. Attachment 6 provides an initial cost estimate for this project. The initial cost estimate for this 7,000 square foot facility along with site preparations. The initial estimated total is $4,098,995, please go through and look at the detail. This includes construction costs, contingency costs, soft costs, which is architect, engineer, survey, and permitting, and furniture and technology costs. So you can get this number, the straight construction, you know, and then ultimately just remember, run an elevator, sprinkle this place, it's a little bit higher construction cost than what you do in your standard facility. They also have, we've got quite a bit built in here for site development and things of that nature. Now, obviously, we're not gonna have an accurate, detailed cost estimate, okay? Until we go through a full-blown 6 to 8 month planning process where we bring in geotech people, architect services, really break this down. Remember, this is a square footage estimate from an architect firm based upon the site plan that we have. You know, remember, we'll have to go in and verify the storm sewer, all the information on there to get a better, more accurate cost. Remember, we're putting this information together to try to apply for a grant, try to share this from. Yes, sir.
How come there's no money for their, for demolition? Second one from the top.
I do not know. I don't think it's the parking lot that would have that.
Okay.
And then, you know, so if you look at that heavy cost down there.
For the airport,
I'm sorry.
for the heavy cost.
Yeah, if you look at that earthwork, that's where I believe he put in quite a bit of money just for parking. That's where he threw in quite a bit of money down there for a lot of things, which I would include.
Parking lot paving.
Maybe, because look at that number, you can see that's a heavy number.
I was gonna say, I want that job.
Well, but, you know, we got storm sewer under there, we got other things, so what the architect's trying to do is cover potentials, we just don't know.
Right.
And,
Yeah, he's probably a little high on that, but that's all right.
And so remember, what we're attempting to do is we're trying to cover our costs and ensure when we put in an application for our grant, then, you know, obviously we're trying to get the dollar for dollar match there. When we go through the full process, you know, when we hire an architectural firm, the planning process, we come in, hire a geotech firm, start doing borings, start figuring out the storm sewer, all of that. And then as we get detailed from the schematic, the programming of the schematics of the interior of the facility, then that's when, at the end of that process, we'll get a much more detailed, more accurate cost estimate. That's when the architect actually starts getting contractors to start giving us estimates. And then you will start getting a little bit more solid on it.
I see. What do you think maybe the footprint is on the disturbed area? It's only gonna be about half of that because you're leaving the other buildings.
Yes, correct.
All right.
So that's really the assessment of the attachment 6. And you can see it includes all of those things. So now I'm going to scroll and I apologize back up to my memory. So I think it's extremely important to note several items about this proposed plan. These items are as follows. You know, this will require mountain projects approval from the board. You know, what we're talking about doing, when you go back and look at that site plan, we are talking about carving off a piece of that property and transfer. Now, we've got positive feedback from the executive director, Patsy Davis. She is talking to her board Friday, and we feel comfortable that everything's going to move forward with that. But just to let everybody know, we do have another organization that we got to work with through this process. So ultimately, that board, Mount Project, will continue to be part of these discussions until the site facility plan is finalized. That doesn't happen until we go through 6 to 8 months of things, and that's when they would finalize their approval and transfer everything. The proposed plan requires service architect to finalize specific space schematics, other engineering services, geotech surveying will be necessary. I've mentioned that already. Number 3, the final building schematic information along with the engineer site plans will allow for more detailed cost estimates, as we discussed earlier. Final zoning, land development, construction permit approval will be dictated by the results of the finalized architectural engineering plans. Steps 1 through 4 that I just mentioned will require 8 to 12 months to complete. These steps will need to be accomplished prior to authorizing construction bid documents. Once you start putting together big documents, that's getting into the serious, one. That's when you start getting into hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cost. So, you know, we're 8 to 12 months away from that. It will take another 8 to 12 months for construction documents to be completed, for bidding to take place. It'll take another 12 months for construction to be completed. This entire process, you know, the grant is due here August 16th. We will get awarded, and we can hopefully, if we move forward in September, and the funds are available in October, but we wouldn't necessarily draw anything down except for planning monies. So from October 2021, it'll take up to 3 years to complete this project. I think it's important for everybody to understand, there are multiple phases of approval phases that we have to go through to get this project accomplished. So the next item is here, the Housing Equity Resources Education. So again, I try to use the same format as I did with the services for the Center for Domestic Peace, trying to give everybody a little bit of history here. Jackson County has been in partnerships and serving the homeless here for several years now. You can see community groups such as Neighbors in Need organized shelter and case management for years. Due to the increased need, county funded Jackson's Neighbor in Need in fiscal year 15-16. Since they're not a nonprofit, what was happening was the county was funding agencies like Projects and Habitat for Humanity, and that was actually the people receiving the funds because Jackson Neighbor in Need didn't have a bank account. And they're not an actual nonprofit. So in the next couple of years, what had occurred after that is the caseload just started drastically increasing, the case management needs started increasing. And so what ended up happening is in the spring of 2017, Jackson County provided funds to Southwestern Child Development. They temporarily took over these responsibilities at the request of the county. And the reason being, I was directly involved in this. The amount of money was increasing that the county, the board of commissioners considering funding to Jackson Neighbor in Need. It was getting to the point where we needed to have an established nonprofit handling the amount of money that we're talking about. We eventually funded in 1 year $150,000 to Southwestern Child Development and $85,000 next year. So Jackson County asked that Southwestern Child Development help take on this. Plus, just so you know, they had an employee at one point that Sheila was allowing, the director was allowed to participate a lot in the Jackson Neighbor in Need. So she was helping with case management at the time. That employee resigned and moved on to a better opportunity. And so it really just forced these issues to truly transition under her oversight. So when Southwest Child took this over, they weren't intending to continue running this. They did this at the request of the county because we were needing a stable entity to help handle the funds. And so if you look at fiscal year 18 and 19, they gave notice to the county that they weren't going to provide these services then. Now, Sheila didn't turn around and say, we're going to cut you off tomorrow. Sheila was just coming back to us respectfully saying, hey guys, we weren't doing this forever. We need you guys to figure out another solution for us. And they were going to work with us on this. So at that point, the county issued a request for proposals to provide temporary shelter services. And the basic core mission of that request for proposals was a couple of things. Is no one's life in our community should be at risk due to exposure to extreme weather. And another core component in that mission is that homeless population should be afforded access to services and programs that eventually could lead to permanent housing solutions. Those are the two goals that I think we still have today when we're talking about the homeless population. So here and here, responded to these proposals. Here's was selected as our county's lead agency to serve the homeless. These services currently include cold weather shelter via hotel during the winter months and case management services that assist in transitioning to permanent housing. I just wanted to throw some numbers for everybody so we understand that this year's budget, there's $153,841 budget to go to here for homeless services. Jackson County has expended approximately $635,000 in the past 5 years for these services, and $705,000 in the past 10. So one version or another. Now, again, this is a budget process. The board of commissioners makes a choice every year to participate. And so I can just tell you, that just shows you the difference in the last 5 to 10 years to be this round and then all the funding necessary. Here, scroll down. Here's looking at transition from the hotel model to a brick and mortar model. Attachment 7 provides information from here regarding the current partnership services, statistics, space needs of a brick and mortar shelter. This was the information that was presented to the board, that was given to the board previously. And so again, it's a part of this, but I'm not going to go over that information. But what I am going to do is go ahead and scroll down to attachment 8. Here. So on attachment 8 provides information regarding the property being considered for the location of the shelter. This property is owned by Evergreen Foundation and is located in Silvertown limits on Medical Park Loop near Harris Regional Hospital. It consists of 3.5 acres with an existing 17,000 square foot facility sitting on that property. A facility formerly housed Meridian Behavioral Health and was a temporary location of Jackson County Health Department. Attachment 9, I'll flip to the next page. Attachment 9 is a letter from Evergreen Foundation stating their willingness to work for Jackson County and here to study the feasibility of converting this building to provide a place to house these services. Attachment 10 is a zoning verification from the town of Silva. It's basically the same zone as where the CDB being proposed to be located. When I mean same zone designation in which shelters are allowed to be placed.
I do have a question, and actually it applies to both of these projects. Mountain Projects owns that property. Once we build on that, will the county own the property then, or will the Center for Domestic Peace own it, or will Mountain Projects retain?
So the intentions are for, we're looking for Mountain Projects to transfer the property. I think the commissioners and the Center for Domestic Peace need to discuss ownership. Now, I believe there's a willingness from CDP to talk to us about if the county wishes to own it versus them, but that is a detail that has to be discussed and worked out in that 12-month, 8 to 12-month period that we're talking.
So there may be a cost of purchasing that property involved in. Oh, okay. What about with Evergreen, if we did those extensive renovations, which could be several billion dollars? Would we own that building then, or would Evergreen retain ownership?
So a couple of things about that that I want to make sure that clearly understand about this. And this kind of gets down to these, when we go down to the extremely important for you to understand about this. Evergreen Foundation is not offering to give us that building. That is not part of this conversation.
Okay.
Evergreen Foundation, that's a 17,000 square foot facility in which you'll see, I did have the architect take a look at that building. We did have architectural plans and engineering plans on that building. So the architect was able to go in and take Mr. Cochran's desire for 12 rooms and that space and so forth, and take a look at that. In that 17,000 square feet, there's 14 upstairs and 3 downstairs. And just where load bearing is, see what makes sense to try to fit that in there. And you'll see the information here is 8,800 square feet. You try to get it smaller, you know, we're trying to go for that 7,000, but he was telling me it didn't make sense to cut it off in certain areas. So he literally ended up at around 8,800 square feet on that upstairs.
Okay.
So the desire, if you go back and read Evergreen's letter, they want to work with us. So they want to try to plan it.
Yeah, I saw that.
But they, at this point, are not giving it to us. I do believe on the homeless side of things, we can talk to them about how we can deal with long-term leases and expensive leases and things of that nature. But the remaining property, I think their expectation is for us to build this out in a way that allows for that property to still be rentable. You know, they recognize it may be harder to rent when you have a homeless shelter next to it, but for them to continue to have some type of income. That's where also, I think, as we would plan this facility out, I think we would start trying to figure out, are there other nonprofits that currently pay rent somewhere else? That would be willing or need to look at that. And I think in that 8 to 12 month period, we would start having those conversations too. But at the end of the day, I don't think we will find ourselves in a place of actually owning this facility.
Would we be paying rent?
Well, I think, well, the idea that I'm approaching with on this is that we're gonna invest in that side. We're gonna have to talk about, yes, we're having discussions right now that has to do with their board. They're open for all of these discussions, but it wouldn't make sense to invest that amount of money and have larger rents. But
Right.
we do need to try to
That's what I
work
was
with them
concerned about.
to still continue to have a rent income. Undeveloped space.
Yes.
You know, Evergreen Foundation, they're not, what's interesting about all this, it's not like this is a private developer who's going to take that money and use it for profits. Evergreen Foundation uses this money, they currently fund these organizations that we're talking about. They currently fund our homeless operations, and they fund other nonprofit operations in our county with the proceeds from these grants. So that's why they recognize we all have a joint, goal here, and I think they're willing to work with us in a reasonable fashion.
Well, it says it was unanimous agreement with the board, but I remember they also charged us quite a bit of rent when it was used as the health department. And I would hate to see us get into investing a bunch of money and then have a rent that was really high.
So what'll happen is going back and we break out the planning portion of this, and we have that discussion.
Sure.
Those are all the details that have to be worked out before you.
That's all gotta be.
Before you,
Yeah.
so what happens when you look at these budgets, you're gonna see I've got 125,000 set aside for both of these projects for what I call the planning, admin side of things. And that's what really has to occur in the next 8 to 12 months.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is I'll go away from here and go to the CDP. The reality is, I think we've got to be open to change in this conversation as the plans get developed. And the reason I mention that is because, I don't want to scare that, but what if I have a different, we go out core drill out there, where we're not building a CDP building, we find that there's an exorbitant expense. I mean, we don't know until we go spend this planning monies. And we don't know on either one of these projects until we work out these detailed plans that we truly have a finalized project. That's it. So,
Since they invest in nonprofits, do you have a sense that they might cut the rent some as a investment in that nonprofit?
what I'm trying to avoid is kind of negotiating that conversation in a public forum right now. So my intent with that discussion would be to appeal to what you're asking. Okay? And my intent would be to keep the annual cost down for here,
Yes.
but turn around and make sure the remaining properties are still there and income producing.
Okay.
That is my overall goal to get, I try to put myself
That
in
makes
their
sense.
board situation.
Sure.
They want to work with us on this because this is a target group for their mission, okay? So that's why I think they're willing to sit down and have this conversation. But I also try to put myself in their view is that ultimately they utilize the income from these facilities to do this mission. So we can put them in a position to still generate income from that facility, not necessarily from the HERE program. And then also put caveats on that bill. We obviously don't want to invest nobody wants to invest that kind of money into a building for it to turn into something else 2 years from now. So these are types of discussions that we'll have to have about how do we ensure long-term access to that building.
What about a piece of property that the county already owns? County already owns that we're either thinking of selling or is just pushed back in the back file, that we could utilize that property, build the building and own the building and the property. Has anybody looked into any of that?
Well, we don't have county property that could do what you're asking. The county property we do have, either has other uses designated for it, it's only what it's actually, and it's not zoned. Now, when you start talking about zoning in this conversation, it's extremely, that's the reason it's important that I put the zoning up to show everybody it's zoned.
Right.
Because the challenge in these conversations is, not only everything that we're talking about, but it's also finding a location that, is acceptable. You're gonna get feedback we'll get feedback from today's presentation in regards to the proposed location, even though it's only appropriate.
Right.
So I do think a real challenge, I don't have that for this grant purpose. I don't have that available. What I have is a willing property owner that's zoned appropriately, that's willing to talk to us with some monies and things designed behind it, but I don't have what you're asking. So what we do have, attachment 11 gives the initial estimate of cost for about 8,800 square feet of $3,523,701. This estimate includes construction costs, contingency, soft costs, engineering survey. We briefly talked about this. I just want to emphasize these points. It's extremely important to note several items about the proposed plan. These items as follows. This requires approval of the Evergreen Foundation Board. Everything that we just talked about, we'll have to go through, develop a plan, talk to them, get final approval, basically everything we just talked about. It will require service of the architect to finalize specific schematics and everything in order to get a true cost estimate. The final building schematic information along with operational flow analysis will allow for a more detailed process. Notice flow analysis, I threw in that just so you know. The operational flow analysis is talking about leaving the remaining portion of that building with the ability to still be rented out to another operation. So this is a little bit more difficult conversation, a little bit more difficult conversation than building and rebuilding. And like what you're talking about, yes, it would be much easier to build a new building than to do what we're talking about. And that does separate about the CDP project versus the HERE project. These are going to be two separate processes. They'll have similar things, but there's a lot more work that's going to have to be put into the HERE project as far as planning. Final zoning, land development, construction permits will be dictated by the results of our plans. Again, reminder steps 1 through 4 take 8 to 12 months to be completed. All this would have to be done before you authorize to go with construction documents. Takes about another 8 to 12 months for construction documents. There's an S. Construction documents to be completed for bidding to take place, and another 12 months for construction. So again, it would be a 3-year project. So, final. Getting to the end, the financial summary. And what this is doing is it's really getting us down to the options available to the board. Before I jump to that, what I'd like to do is I'm going to jump all the way to the end here. Your last page of the documents is basically what it is it's just talking about overall cost versus potential revenues. So all that's doing is showing you that all these numbers that I've talked to you about is the total cost for the Center for Domestic Peace. would be 4,223,995. That's the construction cost plus the 125 planning costs that I've mentioned. And then if you scroll down and look at the, here you have construction costs along with the planning costs. That total cost would be $3,648,701. So total proposed here today is $7,872,696. Right now, the maximum grant that we could ask for from Donald was $2.5 million. If we max that at $2.5 million, that's $5 million, obviously, which shows for both projects, there's a shortfall of $2,872,000. So I just want to point that out because now I'm going to go back to my recommendations. And when you hear me start using the number $2.9 million shortfall, I'm referring to this page. All right, financials. So again, I just showed you attachment 12, provides a summary of projected expenses versus projected revenues. The summary shows that there's an initial shortfall of $2.9 million. That both projects are included in the grant application. There are multiple options for the board to choose from, and they are as follows. One is to reject all proposals at this time. That's always an option. So I have to put that up to the board and say that's an option. I'm going to go through these options and then I'm going to talk to you about just some other items. Two is to move forward with a planning proposal only. So when I say for planning proposals only, I mean $125,000 for the CDP and $125,000 for here. And then you go through that process that we just described before, I'm talking about detailed process, before you get into trying to apply for construction dollars. The third is to move forward with applying for grant funds that completely pays for the Center for Domestic Peace project, but only funds the planning portion of the HERE project. Okay? So if you look at that little table I put in there, what that does is you see to your right, the construction of the Center for Domestic Peace, $4,098,000, $125,000 to plan that project, and $125,000 to go ahead and plan here. And you can see the total project of $4,348,995, and then basically I'm showing the cost there, 50% Dogwood, 50% ARPA funds, county funds. All right. Then the next option is option 4, which is just flipping that conversation. You would move forward with the planning and construction for the homeless shelter for here, and then you would just budget the planning dollars for the Center for Domestic Peace. But you can see that total project cost is $3.773,701, in which it would be split 50-50 either way. And then the final option here is basically applying for everything. And applying for everything, you can see this would require that within the first year, as we know, you apply for everything, that leaves a $2.9 million shortfall. And if that would require in that first 12-month planning section, that the CDP, the Center for Domestic Peace, Center for Domestic Peace and here would have to come up with a plan to come up with that additional $2.9 million in that first 12 months. Basically, the timeline would be the first 12 months, because once you get done with that plan and the schematic, working all these details out, the next phase is the construction cost, or excuse me, developing the construction and bid documents. That costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't pull the trigger on that, okay, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cost unless you know that you got to be paid. And so that would really put it onto them to within a year to come up with a funding plan for the other. And so the other thing I would just conclude is saying August 16th is the grant deadline. It's quickly approaching. Staff from all of our organizations, the Center for Domestic Peace here, Jackson County, the COG, we're working feverishly to try to get the application together. Unfortunately, this leaves, we're just in a tight timeline. That, you know, unfortunately, timeline for the Christian side on the option. We have a long history of supporting both domestic violence and homeless programs. They had already intended to make some type of request. You know, this was going to be coming. It was just going to come after the planning process. And so if it's plausible that Jackson County would assist at either one of these organizations, if it's plausible in your mind, then this is a great opportunity to move forward the grant. These needs don't go away. My point being, they're going to be here in a month, in 6 months, in a year and a half. So it is plausible in your mind that you would even consider some form of assistance, then this is a great opportunity for us to proceed forward. To basically double our money. I thank you for your careful consideration. Going back to the proposals, I would just say, I would hope that we don't reject all proposals because, you know, this is a great opportunity. I hope that we don't just settle on the planning dollars, because even though it'd be great to get half of $250,000, we could be walking away from a significant funding opportunity for brick and mortar, which is very rare in this day. So at the end of the day, I would hope the board wouldn't consider anything less than options 3, 4, and 5.
What's, so the timeline is next month for the announcement. All of a sudden, next month, they come out and say, well, we'll give you $200,000. And that pretty much limits us at that point.
I would still request that we go through the planning process. I think the worst, if you decide to go with one facility and they go less than the amount to fund the facility, I think that would force us to just go through the planning process. At minimum, I hope that I hope we apply for as much as 2.5 as we can. And then also at minimum, I hope we spend the next 8 to 12 months going through this detailed planning process with or without these dogwood funds to help us see what the actual cost is going to be.
Well, as I sometimes do, I'll just jump up and say how I feel about it. I have heard too many questions about the HERE project to support applying for the $2.5 million for them. I think if we do anything for the HERE project, it ought to be just expand planning funds, because I think there's just too many unknowns. The rent, I just think we got some questions that we need to be answered, and we could do some planning, continue discussions on that, but I think the other project, the Center for Domestic Peace, is much further along, and it seems to be the easier of the 2 projects to, assuming that Mountain Projects this week approves that. I think it'll have to be contingent upon their approval. That's just my personal opinion.
I agree with you, Brad. Chairman,
What's everybody else think of it? We've seen these numbers and we've all heard the same thing.
I agree. I think it's more important for doing the Center for Domestic Peace. Because I agree with you on getting everything sorted out on that leasing part of the deal. Plus, I feel that it's more important to take care of women and their children right now that are being abused by their husbands. They need to be taken care of now.
Which they're receiving services do make it. We have a strong partnership.
Right. That's just something like that.
I really would like, I agree with the commissioners that have expressed their opinions about the Center for Domestic Peace. I do want to see us move forward. I think it's a wonderful opportunity with, as long as Mountain Projects goes along with it, a great location, like they work out. I do want to see us move from a hotel model.
Yeah, I do too.
And, I know you wanted that for many years, during that ahead. If we don't, if we apply for the planning, would that not allow us to get that extra money?
Well, could we be eligible to reapply the next funding cycle?
Yeah, so my conversation with Ms. Grimes, who is
Okay,
at the end of that
yes,
announcement,
Yes.
who's Vice President of the Housing Program.
right,
When we were looking at the shortfall of the
Uh-huh.
2.9 million, she was saying her budget cycle starts over in January.
oh, okay,
And so, I took it from them that we have the opportunity to go and request funds at a later time, for housing.
okay.
Boys, how do you feel?
No, the year project is just a bunch of bear. We just don't have a nice. Might be a real good situation, you know, fix that thing. But I just heard somebody talk about who owns the property, who owns this. Like, and are we sitting right there buying something? But it all may work out. It's fine. Probably somebody's got some answers for some of that. I'm talking about with this property. That you might build. No. That's a good plan.
Or if we could find one for cheap, you know,
But that's another option that gives us some time to do some research.
you know,
Yeah.
that we'll find a piece of property that's inexpensive and it's zoned for that. There gotta be a piece somewhere. Gotta be. 'Cause I'm skeptical.
Property there at the hospital. I can't foresee there being a problem with it being there. That could be big.
How do you feel about moving forward with that Center for Domestic Peace?
Feel like we should.
What's your thoughts on it?
I think it sounds like we're all in agreement. Moving forward with both planning, 125,000 for both planning, so we can get some of these questions answered. And variables, black and white. And, definitely for the Center for Domestic Peace moving forward.
So that would mean that we as a board are talking about option 3.
What the board wishes to move forward, then we need a position of control action.
Yeah.
To authorize me to basically, sign off on the grant application with the understanding that we're looking to commit $2,174,000, say $500 up to that.
I mean, and also, how confident are we about projects? Visualize.
I mean, it needs to be continued.
Yeah.
Then the grant application will go in, will be last on that Monday. But we feel comfortable with it.
Last time we had conversations about
That was 2 weeks ago. We were discussing this very issue that we're discussing today. It's not the issue of shortfall and, you know, we were discussing all of this, and that's when they were telling me that if we chose to move forward with both projects, then that's when they were telling me that their new grant cycle, their new budget year starts in January, and that while we're doing the planning, we can come back and resubmit. I can be more serious.
So you need a motion to, authorize, county to move forward with option 3, to authorize you to move forward with item option 3, to submit a grant proposal to Dogwood Trust. And, contingent on the approval of Matt Clark. That's further request, is someone like to put that forward in a motion?
So move.
All right, I have a motion, is there a second? Second. Any other questions or comments?
No, I just want to thank, Manager Adams for all this work and the people that helped.
It's
It's
been
a
a
lot of work,
Lot of work.
a lot of work, and it was real thorough as much as you could be, so thank you so much.
Yeah.
There's nothing bad about this.
No.
And in the sense that hopefully we get a grant, hopefully Dogwood comes in and provides us $2.1 million in grant funds. And this is all good conversation.
Absolutely. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments? Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Deep?
Yes.
Commissioner Woody?
Yes.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes.
Commissioner Strickland?
Yes.
Chairman
Yes, motion carries.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So be it.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Say, this was not going to be even the Jackson County taxpayers' dollars.
Okay, one point, we talked about that.
That's something right there. Or could you see the one there? It's just- I did. I was